Hello, my friends, and welcome to What's Up. This is the conversation between Gregg Braden and myself about whatever is on our minds. So, what's on your mind, my friend? What's up?
Well, what's on my mind these last few days. We have a lot of friends who have been deeply impacted by the storm, all the way from from the Florida coast all the way up. And surprisingly, many of those friends are simply not prepared. And the word that comes to me, and it's not intended to offend anyone, but I really want our community to be aware and to prevent suffering down the line, because we all know this isn't the last time it's going to happen. It's the word complacency. And what I found is that so many people in our community, for a number of reasons that I want to talk about, have been led to believe that they don't need to take any steps beyond everyday life to take care of themselves and their families, that someone else is going to do it for them. And what we're seeing, Asheville, North Carolina is a perfect example. The authorities did not even show up. They showed up 2 days after the storm with yellow tape to keep people from going into bad buildings. But there was no one there to help people. They were caught off guard. And it's kind of a mystery to me, because you and myself and others for years now have been talking about just basic provisions, not out of fear that something is bad is going to happen, but out of the
It's
recognition.
insurance. It's
Well,
insurance. Yeah.
it is, but it's the recognition that this isn't business as usual, that we're
Yeah.
living in extraordinary time where many cycles, natural rhythms and cycles are converging. Some of those are climate cycles, some are economic cycles, some are human conflict cycles, but they're all converging right now. There's this little window of time where it simply makes sense to take the precautions for you and your family, for the things that are vital to you, and that's different for everyone. For somebody, they're okay without electricity, but not without food. For some people, they don't want it, their kids don't want to go a day without electricity. So we have I've got entire YouTube videos where we lead people through the actual products and the price points where they can
Yeah.
purchase, from inexpensive to very expensive solar generators, propane generators, spare water, how to store it, food, good, healthy food that you can have and prepare on your own, that lasts up to, I think, 40 years in storage if you don't use them. And so it's very sad to me that so many people now, they're saying it's going to be weeks before any supplies in the grocery stores of some of these places. The water treatment plants have been decimated. There's no clean water. People are without heat, without lights, without power, with certainly without electricity, no communications, and they're scared, John. And my heart just goes out to them, because I don't want my family to be scared.
Yeah.
But this is the time that we're living in, and so what I've seen, John, is that complacency is on different levels. When people sense that around their physical environment, they're also sensing it around politics, around the policies of their community and their nations. And I want to talk about that as well. But I want to ask you, you are leading your community so that they're not complacent in terms of communications and preparation for
Yeah.
the unexpected. And you
Yeah.
guys probably have gotten through this really well compared to some other communities.
Well, we haven't gotten through it yet, but we're trying to get prepared. As a matter of fact, as you know, I head up the emergency communications kind of capability for our county. I'm an amateur radio operator, and we've organized a number of us, and we have towers and repeaters and other kind of things as a last resort communications kind of capability, so that if nothing else works, that works. We're trying to work our way through alternative sources for water and through
Yeah.
electricity and so on. And Lord knows I've got lots of 5-gallon buckets full of the food you're talking about that'll be around for 40 years. I think of this just as insurance. It's just why in the world do you have insurance? I mean, you drive all day long and you never get in a wreck. Why would you worry about that, or your house, or fire, or
Yeah.
anything else? Well, the possibility exists, and if it is, then it's catastrophic. And I would only suggest, and one of the things that's really influenced me in the last few months is I read this book called 1 Second After. I think it's 1 or 1 minute
Yep.
after. Can't
Yep.
remember which. And it is a marvelous novel based upon how life transpires after an electromagnetic pulse that wipes out all the electricity. So you don't have to, that it doesn't have to be based upon an electromagnetic pulse. It could be any of the other kind of possibilities that exist, and there's plenty of them, let me tell you, that could really wipe things out, as we've seen down in the Carolinas. From my perspective, trying to look at the future in some kind of systematic way, not to just say, wow, and you just keep backing up saying, wait a second, there's something really big coming downstream here. And even if it's small big, it's big compared to the really.
Yeah.
And so it just makes sense for all of us if we're going to participate, particularly in this kind of evolutionary jump, this evolutionary leap that we're all so interested in. I mean, that's part of the composition of how these things happen, apparently.
Well, John, yes to everything you're saying, and for me, it goes even deeper. I mean, it's what I'm finding, and I study my community, and I'm a good listener, and I'm learning to be even a better listener, and I'm listening to what they're saying. Many people in our community and our family, this is our global family, I think have been misled by some of the philosophies that are out there, including the New Thought philosophy. So this is about mindset, because we build the world around us based upon the way we think of ourselves and our relationship to that world. And so here's what I'm hearing, and here's what they're saying to me. They're saying that when they believe that when they prepare for something like we're talking about, that they're going to make it happen
Mm.
because they're thinking about it. And so this is one of the false narratives in the New Thought community, is that whatever you think about, you're going to bring into your reality. And I see where that comes from, and I was exposed to that as well. But there's a nuance here. And for our community watching today, I want to emphasize this. I don't want you to be afraid to think and simulate in your mind all possibilities. We're one of the rare forms of life that can do that. Here's the key. What you think about in your mind, you're not going to see in your world until you give it energy. And the energy, it's either the love for what you are imagining or thinking of or simulating or considering, or it's the fear of what you are simulating in your mind. We're going to get through this, but the thing is to get through it with a soft landing, and we do that by being responsible. And for me, John, this is all it is on a personal level, to consider what would happen. And then people say, well, just turn it over to God. God will take care of me. And I understand that thinking. But if you're going to come from that perspective, and I was born and raised in a very conservative community in northern Missouri, and it was drilled into me, God helps those who help themselves, is essentially we do what we can on our end, and what we can't do, then we let a higher power deal with that. But we have to be proactive, not complacent. And especially now, this is not the last storm. And John, honestly, you and I have talked about this offline. I think it was a natural storm. I think it was a natural storm that may have been enhanced through artificial means. And if that's true, I don't think it's the last one we're going to see. It's not the first. I think what we saw in the Gulf of Mexico and Houston a few years ago had all the earmarks of having some technology
Of
enhance
course.
what was already
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah. And, all of the major countries, handful of them maybe, have the capability to do this kind of stuff. And, for my money, I don't know any secrets about it, but I would guess that for the last 2 years, they've had these horrible torrential kind of storms in China upstream from the Three Gorges Dam, and they're clearly trying to break the dam and destroy the food production capabilities. And I don't know of any country in the world that might want to do that, but you could think about it, and you might find one that we're familiar with. And so, I mean, this is a lot of stuff going on that we don't understand. There are a lot of people that still think, the weather is the weather and it's natural and so on. And it's not the case anymore. And they're manipulating this reality at many different kind of levels. And that again brings you back to saying that if you can see that emerging and see it around you, then you ought to prepare. I mean, this is
Sure.
Boy Scout stuff. This is not a big deal conceptually.
I think a lot of people know I was working behind the scenes during the Cold War years in the defense industry for a company then was called Martin Marietta. Now it's Lockheed Martin. But this was the big deal with the treaty between the former Soviet Union and America, the SALT I, SALT II treaties, and the hangup was not about the missiles. It was about what they thought were radar dishes that were actually being used as directed energy. And we actually have treaties between countries prohibiting the alteration of weather for wartime use. So that's not a conspiracy theory. I mean, we have treaties that prevent that, and it appears that those treaties may not be being honored right now for whatever reason. So, we can go off a million different directions with that. For me, the bottom line is it's not business as usual, and we can't possibly know what's coming down the line. What we do know is that we as individuals and our families, we can have a soft landing or we can have a tough landing when infrastructure temporarily is
Yeah.
lost. Please take care of yourselves and your family. Go to my website, go to some of the other websites that are out there. You can go to
Yeah.
our
Go to
video
an
channel.
organization called American Contingency,
Hmm.
which is a pretty smart bunch of people who have kind of systematically looked across all of the different dimensions, food and water and communications and so on. And they've got training and they've got local groups. I mean, in terms of amateur radio things, they've got something like 3,000 ham radio operators around the country who are all into their network, all getting prepared for a time of, like contingencies related to large scale kind of change. This is a deterministic reality that we live in. There are precursors and things that produce what then ultimately shows up. And we are being given signal after signal after signal that this is getting more unraveled and more uncertain and more chaotic in the coming months, if not years. And that I mean, if you don't hear the message, and if you don't respond, then it's your own problem, I guess. But the message is out there.
It's unnecessary suffering on this level. So this is one level of complacency that I just wanted. You asked me, Greg, what's on your mind? This certainly has been on my mind the last couple of days because I'm seeing people suffer unnecessarily, needlessly. And it's about, and I'm not criticizing, they're good people, they're good friends, they've been misled into a sense of complacency. And it's a way of thinking. And it goes to even higher levels. So I'm going to kick this up a level. Most people that I have talked to in my community, and I'm in a rural community here in northern New Mexico. If I go to my little co-op to go grocery shopping, or I go in the local restaurants, very few people know about the meetings that just happened this last week at the United Nations, the Summit for the Future. It's called the UN Summit of the Future, is what it was called. The decisions, the agreements, the pledges, and the commitments that were made during that summit impact every life, every one of us, in my opinion, in not the best ways. And most people have no idea that this is even happening because they've become complacent when it comes to awareness and you have to work at it, awareness of the changes, the social engineering that is being attempted, that is being proposed, and in some cases already being implemented. That's going to impact all of our lives between now and the end of the decade, the year 2030. So this summit happened this last week. It was in New York, and I'm just going to look at the numbers here. There were 56 pledges that all the member nations agreed to, and the United States is one of those, covering 5 different themes. Those, just quickly, those themes are sustainable development. So they're doubling down. They're using this conference and these commitments to double down on the UN SDG 2030 agenda, the 17 sustainable goals. They're not getting anywhere with them. They're not where they need to be in the timeline. Only 10% of the goals have been met, and there's only six years left. So they're using this to double down on those. So that's just one of the 5 areas. International peace and security is another one. Science and technology is another one. Youth and future generations is another one. The 5th one, transforming global governance. So these are the 5 goals. They sound on the surface, they sound beautiful, just like those 17 sustainable development goals sound beautiful. Now you look at the fine print. How are they going to achieve those goals? This is where it becomes very concerning, in my opinion, John, one man's opinion. For example, food security. The way that they are hoping, you would think food security might have something to do with helping people produce food. What's happening is the policies are in place, making it very difficult for small and local farms, traditional farms, not just America, all over the world. They're driving those farmers when their crops collapse, that's difficult to get the loans that have carried them over in the past. They go out of business. The corporate farms are coming in, sweeping in, buying up huge amounts of land, and now they're implementing GMO policies, creating food that's not good for us. It's not good for us. All kinds of problems, and putting those people out of business, putting them on welfare programs, and that's just global health. Who doesn't want global health? Well, you can just imagine the way they're hoping to achieve that global health is using new technology, gene-based therapies that we have seen introduced in recent years on a wide scale, global scale, like we've never seen before, to achieve those goals. You got to look at the fine print. So here's the thing, and this is where it gets really interesting. I was talking to someone about this. They said, well, are they legally binding? Is the future summit, those pledges, are they legally binding? They are not. But the way that they're doing this is the pledges tie into pre-existing policies that are legally binding. They are tying right into what's called the UN Charter. The UN Charter is legally binding. So this summit is tying into policies linked to the UN Charter that make them legally binding. Most people don't have any idea it's happening. They don't recognize it when it's happening in their community and in their lives. They're not aware that these things are happening. That's a form of complacency, because we're all exhausted. We're just emotionally burned out from all of the change, but you cannot allow that sense of exhaustion to lead to the complacency unless you are okay with having someone else decide what food you eat, where you travel, where you spend your money, what kinds of things you can say to your friends on social media. All of that is part of what these pledges are all about, really clamping down on the sharing of information freely so that narratives can be controlled more easily. All of that was part of this summit.
Yeah, I think, and it's kind of an inevitable. I talk about this series of kind of, they're not weak signals anymore. They're strong signals that are pointing toward this future that they're trying to do. But there's another wild card, of course, that you're familiar with, and that is the guys like Martin Armstrong say that there's a global civil war that comes up in the next couple of years, and that is to say next year, and to the 25s, 26 and 27, and that by 2027 that a lot of the geopolitical kind of structures that we have all depended upon and that would support these kinds of initiatives, right?
Sure, John. And I think, I follow Martin Armstrong and others, and I think all those things are possible, but it doesn't mean they are necessary. I think those things could happen. We could lose our nation. We could lose our 50 states as a union. We could have a global civil war. We could do those things because of complacency, where people have not been involved in the process. So it happens to them rather than the change coming from them. When we see the proposals coming up that limit our ability to share ideas freely with one another, it was John Kerry in a panel discussion at the World Economic Forum, WEF, and they were talking about the issues that they're facing. And he said America's First Amendment, which is our free speech amendment, is the greatest roadblock between governments implementing these policies, because people have the ability to share information that sometimes doesn't support the policy. So he's seeing free speech as a roadblock, and as a roadblock, it means they need to do something about it.
Yeah.
So complacency and not being aware of these kinds of things, now all of a sudden we start seeing all kinds of new policies, show up on our social media. And people say, well, where did that come from? Well, it's not spontaneous and a one-off. It is part of a system that is attempting to be implemented in all of this. And if you read the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, Goal 17 is to give the UN the ability to implement the previous 16 goals.
Yeah.
So it is giving the UN the ability essentially to become the world government.
Well, these trends are essentially antithetical to this personal empowerment and freedom, and this path that goes toward this new human. And so and I would suggest that they're losing at some really fundamental level, and it's this kind of increasing increasing shrillness associated with the policies and the initiatives that they're trying to put in place, including the one you're talking about, are all indications that they're trying to grab this thing wherever they can to keep it from coming apart. I say this all the time, is to start getting on the side of building a vision of what new world, rather than trying to save the old world, try to figure out how do we get to a new world.
I agree, John. And what it boils down to me, it's common sense. When we see people attempting to lead us, leaders attempting to lead us in ways that prevent us from being the best version of ourselves, prevent us from the healing modalities that have been time tested for centuries. A divinity defined is the ability to transcend perceived limitations. Anything that veils our ability to become greater than the challenges that life brings to our doorstep, those are not good for us. And at least be aware of what we're giving away. If you're going to support those policies, be aware that you're giving away ultimately your humanness.
I see this as being a last-ditch attempt to suppress the evolutionary leap of the species on the planet, literally. This is all an attempt to keep humans from making this leap into this new space, which, by the way, I believe then destroys the kind of energetic sustenance that supports the negative kind of forces that are playing, have played for forever, kind of a role here. Well, Gregg Braden, thank you very much for the conversation. It's always fun to talk to you. We hope you'll come back and find out more about us at arlingtoninstitute.org. Come back, be with us in another couple of weeks when Gregg and I get together again. And so thank you, Gregg. See you, my friend. Be very well. See you in 2 weeks.
Thank you, John, for this conversation. I want to thank everybody for sharing a little bit of your day with us today. I'll see you then, John. Take care.
Yeah, thanks.